To order. Held here on the homelands of the Ktunaxa peoples. Do we have any late items this evening, Grace?
There's no late items, Mr. Mayor.
All right, hearing none, could I have a mover to adopt the agenda? Councillor McBain moves and Councillor Fox seconds. All those in favor? That motion is carried. Next up, we have the adoption of the minutes held on July the 14th, which was our last meeting. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor Cairns moves and Councillor McBain seconds. Discussion? Go ahead, Councillor Cairns.
Thanks. I just wanted to note, it says that both Councillor Dunnebeck and I were present at that meeting, and I'd like it noted that in that section up front that online participation was terminated at 7:35 due to city technical issues, and consequently we were unable to participate.
Okay, good catch.
Okay.
To my knowledge, it's already in there.
But up front it says that we were present, which I would assume would lead people to think that we.
So it's
participate.
written in the minutes where the communication was cut off and when you had to leave the meeting.
Right. It is, but it also, the way it's written, it sounds like we just left the meeting too. So yeah, it's all right if it goes this way, but I would like it. I would prefer that it note that we were unable to participate
Due to
city
technical
technical issues.
difficulties.
Okay.
How's that?
I will make sure that it's there
Right.
before the minutes get signed off.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Maurice. Any further discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Next up, we have the adoption of the Committee of the Whole, minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting held on October 21st, 2004. Mover, please. Councillor Cairns moves and Councillor McBain seconds. 2024. Skill testing question. You passed, Councillor Dunnebeck. All those in favor? Motion is carried. Okay, our acting detachment commander is not here, could be out on a call. So what we're going to do is move to the next delegation on the list, which is you, Leonard. Welcome to council. The podium is yours.
I'll do my best to try and not trip over my tongue here, but
I think you'll do just fine.
a little bit about myself and where I come from and why this is important to me. For starters here is, as a resident of Kimberley going back into the mid-50s and growing up in Marysville in a much slower time, I still recall a time when it felt like a much safer place to move about the community. Parents were much more at ease, allowing their children out in the community to live a life that we all look for. Yes, the world has changed in so many ways over those many years. Our population is much larger now than it was back then, but that's not to say that we're not a smarter society. We are, though, capable of making better decisions that affect us all in our day-to-day. We as a part of a changing world have made advancements in so many ways. We've got seat belts, airbags, the vehicles are safer, the highways and byways are all safer places. The roadways, paved shoulders, and even our municipal streets are mostly all paved and maintained so much better. All of this being said, with all of these improvements, we still are, so many of us, getting quite complacent, in a hurry to get from here to there. At times, speeding, the use of cell phones while driving, the lack of caring at a stop sign. Then there's the lack of caring for the foot traffic at crosswalks or intersections, both marked and unmarked. All of these things at the end that end up where a person may possibly get to their destination a few seconds or maybe even a minute sooner than one would have by paying attention to all of the things they are doing for our safety and all of us are around us. For the past few years, I've been involved in the Speed Watch program. What I've noticed is, when out in the community with the radar equipment, is that there are some in the area who will only slow only when their speed is on the monitor and the attendee watching is and appearing to write things down about them. Then there are those who, and this has happened to me, who will just maintain their speed and carry on and wave as if to snub us, I guess. But nonetheless, there are the majority of the traveling public within the community who are playing by the rules and following the posted speed limits. Also, by being involved in this organization, I have had the opportunity to meet Ingrid Barkup of the ICBC. She was the liaison for Speed Watch program. By way of my conversations with her, I was able to locate and identify a lot of the information in my research. Excuse me. Now, I do know that we all have places to be and things to do, and however, if that means that we have to risk the safety of a kid out playing or someone walking at the side of the street, possibly a neighbor or a friend or just someone else trying to get somewhere else. I've done the research on, and the data shows that if someone happens to be struck by a vehicle, this survivability rates rise from 20% at 50 kilometers an hour to 90% at 30 kilometers an hour. I personally am all about the 90%. Studies have also shown that for every 1 kilometer rise in the speed, typically there is a 3% rise in the injuries of an accident. Not something that any of us want to hear about or, heaven forbid, be a part of. But studies have all taken place for only one reason, and that is that they have happened and they will happen again. Further to the previously mentioned percentages on survivability, yet one more study shows that at 30 kilometers an hour, 9 persons would survive out of 10 incidents. At 40 kilometers an hour, now it's only 6 would survive out of 10 incidents. At 50, wow, down to 2 persons would survive out of 10 incidences. At 60 or higher, the survivability just isn't there. Not good by any means. Now, in my opinion, all of that I've just said should be more than enough reason to work towards lowering the speed limit in our streets to a maximum of 40 kilometers an hour. But for some reasons, if any of you are still on the fence in this happening throughout Kimberley, then think about a few other reasons that have this as this follows. We all know the community is made up of families, so many of them young families, where our streets contain both bikes, both e-bikes and pedal bikes. There are skateboards, then there are just people out walking. We are a community of outdoorsy people, and in order to continue along this path, we really need to keep our streets available to all of our residents and visitors as well. We really need to keep up our reputation of a destination city and a place where anyone would be happy to live. The lower speed limits on our streets will not only help us to keep everyone safe from any possible accidents or incidences, but It will also promote a healthier population by having our citizens out walking, biking, and just being alive and enjoying life here. Over the past few months, I've had the opportunity to speak first with Sergeant Steve Wilcox, who I just found out is now up north of the Kimberley RCMP. Prior to his leaving, in our conversations, he assured me that if the city was to go ahead with a speed reduction community-wide, he and his team would work towards the enforcement of the rule on our streets. Now that our Corporal Kletzel is managing the area for the RCMP, he and I spoke on July the 30th, and he has also told me that they would do the best to enforce the new rule of 40 kilometers in our community. Now, for who wants to be first to make the community change like this? Well, guess what? We are far from the first. In our local area, Fernie's already there, Sparwood's there. The streets locally are at 40 kilometers an hour. Then also having done the same, to name a few, in BC are Saanich, Courtenay, Campbell River, Squamish, Esquimalt, View Royal, Colwood, Nanaimo, and now most recently, 25 neighborhoods of Vancouver. Then there are the streets in Alberta, Calgary, Edmonton, Spruce Grove, Leduc, Fort Saskatchewan, Cold Lake, and so many other small communities. Arguments against reducing the speed limits, costs of the signage. Historically, municipalities believed that the Motor Vehicle Act required a speed limit assigned for every block for a reduced speed limit, which would be very expensive to implement and maintain. In early 2022, the Ministry of Transport and Infrastructure clarified that municipalities do not need to post speed limits and signs every block for a reduced speed limit, which has encouraged many communities to reconsider and lower the speed limits. Signs entering a town at either end showing the maximum speeds of the community will do. Driver frustration. Lower speed limits can frustrate drivers, potentially leading to them ignoring the limits or feeling false sense of security. Personally, I do not see this as a reason to stop the city from making our streets safer for all, but more of an opportunity to show the people in the area that we all can benefit from this change in so many ways. Enforcement challenges. Some communities believe that even lower speed limits enforcement would be difficult, making changes ineffective. As I've already said, here in Kimberley, we do have the RCMP on our side, willing to assist in the change. It may, however, take some time for the transition. Arguments for reducing of speed limits, improve pedestrian safety, lower speeds, significantly reduce the risk of fatalities and injuries in collisions and pedestrians, cyclists, particularly on residential streets. Reduce speeds or reduce stopping distances. Slower speeds mean vehicles can stop more quickly, reducing the likelihood of the severity of a crash. A shift in driver culture, lower speed limits can encourage a change in driver behavior, making safer for all use. Now, the last page here, I'm not going to read it all. What it's basically saying is Vancouver has adopted a new policy and they are doing 25 neighborhoods. They are starting to put up signs. It's going to take, I believe it said here, 3 years to do it. And they've elected to not go to 40 kilometers an hour. They were going to 30. Now, their residential streets are going to change throughout the city, and this was by a mandate of 100% of their council. So I am saying that here in Kimberley, in my opinion, after living here all my life and seeing now that we have so much more population and people trying to get about, our streets are busier. Slowing down the speed is not going to make them more busy. It's just going to take the traffic and slow it all down. Everybody is still going to get to where they want to go, and it's only a matter of a few seconds to possibly a minute longer.
Awesome. Pardon me. Thank you for your presentation, Leonard. Councillor McBain, go ahead.
Yeah, just a clarification. And before I ask that, I appreciate the presentation, Leonard. I walk a lot, and all the things that you're observing from your speed zone post, I observe pretty much daily. So I appreciate that. I'm a little skeptical on the behavior part and how speed limits can change it, but I want to get. Are you thinking like this, like a 40 kilometer zone would kind of only be limited to like residential streets, residential zones, but not necessarily arterials like Knighton and roads like that?
We as a municipality, and I say we because I'm part of this town and I have been, like I say, all my life, we cannot control the highway. All the other streets we can control.
Understood.
And that being said, now I know on Rotary Drive, I believe there's a center line for, if not all of it, part of it. Now, I think that center line might be something we may have to talk to the ministry about, because some of the reading I'd done said that they could only, the municipalities could only change the streets that did not have a center line.
But just for clarification, your primary concern, I would say, is just like residential streets, side streets.
I would like to see everything except for the highway.
Okay.
And that would be my goal. That's what I would hope for. There's, like we were talking earlier, a few of us, and if you look at Rotary Drive, between the skate park and the highway, there's only very small portion of it that is 50. Then from the school to the highway, or from the skate park down, yes, it's 50. So it's not going to change a lot on that one. Knighton Road, I would like to see that one change. There's a lot of young families in these communities all through the city. And what I'm seeing is not just in the summertime with the bicycles, I'm seeing also in the winter. I've retired here now about 7 years ago. So I'm starting to see more about this community than I ever did for many years before. And what I'm seeing is even in the wintertime, you've got kids out there on snowshoes and play in neighborhoods. You've got them on cross-country skis. Kids pulling around a toboggan. They're looking for a place to play, place to hang out, place to have fun. I'd like to see them find that and find their way home.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor. Further? Go ahead, Councillor Cairns.
Thank you. Thank you, Leonard, for your presentation. I really appreciate the information and the research that you've done and bringing it forward this evening. And absolutely agree. It's getting really busy. And I know Dinah and Daryl, who are here, have done some number counting, and the numbers have been pretty shocking to me of the level of traffic in the community. And definitely, a lower speed limit has plenty of benefits, especially in those residential neighborhoods. Often there's no sidewalks there. So, I'm a strong proponent, want to see that safer streets for all users, walkers, bikers, those who use mobility aids, those who are in transit, and for drivers. And I'd be in strong support of actually seeing a 30 kilometer an hour zone in the residential areas in the downtown core. And I also think there's more tweaks generally that need to be made. And I think there's, a case for a broader strategy for road safety that would also include, school zones, right? The safe and active schools. And I see examples of that in other communities where it's a whole, there's a number of different initiatives that need to come together to make a broader safety strategy. And I also see that Interior Health has a Vision Zero road safety funding program, and that there's 200 projects that have been funded to date to improve road safety. And some of those include infrastructure upgrades, intersection narrowing, speed bumps, upgraded and new pedestrian crossings, lights, and construction of new multi-use pathways for active road users. So I see there's a whole lot of different pieces,
Oh, there is, there
and it's,
definitely.
you know, it's a big picture
Like
piece.
I'm very happy to see that in Marysville, we finally got a raised crosswalk at the school.
Right, right.
Awesome. It slows people down. Now, these signboards around town that tell me my speed, they're great, but only for a select few. Like, it's not, I personally don't believe it's the majority. I think it's a minority. For the reason being, when I worked with the speed check group, I noticed that some do and don't care about those speeds. And when that sign is saying I'm doing 53 in a 30 zone, and if I've seen that every day, and I travel by there, after a couple of months, I'm not even seeing that anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Personally, I would.
Okay,
I'll
We
just
gotta-
finish up really
okay,
quickly.
please.
So yeah, my point would be, I think it's, you know, it's a piece of a bigger strategy that I'd really like to see. And then just, yeah, I do note that there are, you know, surveys out there that have been coming out. It's a very topical issue, and surveys of British Columbians say that, you know, more than half support 30 kilometers an hour in residential neighborhoods. So it's a really active discussion, and yeah, I really appreciate you bringing this forward to
Thank
our
you.
attention.
Last comment to Councillor Fox.
Yeah, sorry. I also want to thank you for your all the information that was in your presentation. There was a lot of research that went into that, and I appreciate that. I agree with Councillor Cairns. I think our streets could be safer, and I would also support it dropping to 30, but I'm a one-car family and I walk around a lot. So I also see, like, sometimes it can be really scary to just try and get across the street. So yeah, I don't think there's anything really that controversial about it. I think lots of municipalities are doing it. So yeah. Thank you.
Councillor. So as fate would have it, the streets and traffic bylaw is currently open for review, and that's where consideration for this would fall. So what we can do is refer this back to staff to have this added to that analysis. I have a mover. Councillor Fox moves, Councillor Karen seconds. Everybody in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Leonard. Appreciate your time. Okay, next up. Our acting detachment commander is not going to be with us tonight. He's otherwise engaged. So what we'll do now is move on to the age-friendly accessibility plan presentation. Kate, the floor is yours.
Wonderful, thank you. And good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. I think I just need the presentation up, Maurice, if that's okay. Great. Great, so if we can just start on the first slide. Yeah, so I just wanted to take you through some of the background in developing this age-friendly accessibility plan. We're right at the end of the plan, and I wanted to give you a bit of the timeline, some of the community engagement activities, and some of the data that went into the plan. And then I'll talk a little bit about the different results and how we categorize those, and then some thoughts about moving forward. So just in terms of a bit of an overview, we started back in the fall. I met with the project team, and we assembled a number of documents, so city documents, planning documents. I also did an environmental scan. So I looked at similar sized communities. I looked at accessibility features in other areas. I did a brief lit review and brought together all of that information prior to starting some community engagement planning. So from there, I developed a survey, and that survey, it's a bit of a mix of age-friendly surveys that we've done in the past. So some of the questions that we've asked in the past that we know work well in smaller communities, along with some information from the Public Health Agency of Canada, their age-friendly indicators, and some questions that were modeled after the Canadian Community Health Survey. Right now, there's not a standard survey document or a survey tool for age-friendly planning, so we're bringing together sort of best practices wherever we can. From there, we had the survey online and also some paper copies that were distributed throughout the community. And I did public engagement through Teams and phone calls, so a bit of a virtual public engagement to begin. And then I came up to Kimberley for a week, and we had some in-person focus groups and interviews. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And from that, I took back all of that data, so all of the background data, all of the community engagement data, and put that together into the plan document. And we've developed that report with the wonderful help of Jasmine, getting that report together, and Maurice. And this draft is what I'm going to talk about tonight, or the finalized draft. So if we can have the next slide, that would be great. Yeah, so what informs the plan is not only my experience with other communities, so I think this is age-friendly project number 11 for me. So I've been in a number of similar sized communities, and some of the same issues come up in many different communities. All communities are different, but some themes are persistent. So we also worked closely with the Accessibility Advisory Committee. They were wonderful. They got involved in the planning. I spoke to members of the advisory committee one-on-one. I had them do a photo voice exercise. So they took pictures of things in the community that they saw as either assets or barriers, and those pictures are part of the plan as well. And then we did focus groups in the community that were held in various different locations, including at the Aquatic Center. I actually had a focus group in a coffee shop. We tried to reach as many people as possible, and the response actually was pretty high given the size of the community. And in fact, I did more interviews in Kimberley than I did in the city of Richmond, because people were so interested, I think, in giving feedback and being involved in the process. So that was wonderful. I interviewed both residents and community members, but I also talked to city staff, and I talked to service providers working with folks with accessibility needs and older adults. And then we had that survey going at the same time, as I mentioned. Next slide. So the plan includes, of course, information about accessibility and older adults. It has the core areas that the city can focus on, including some of the direct resident feedback, and that's been brought together in the 8 age-friendly dimensions. So these are the planning dimensions that are used worldwide. They're used in BC, but they're also used around the world to do age-friendly assessment and planning, and for report writing. From that, we came up with sort of 5 big ideas, and I'll talk both about those dimensions and the big ideas in the next slides. So if we can go to the next slide, we'll talk about the first dimension, which was outdoor spaces and public buildings. So one of the big themes that came up was snow removal. That is not a surprise, given that there's a lot of snow in the winter in Kimberley, and not unusual. We hear about snow removal a lot in a lot of northern communities in particular, but it seemed to be a really maybe a little bit of a bigger topic in Kimberley. But what we found is that maybe it's a bit more of a disconnect between what the city's doing and what residents are perceiving about snow removal. So We've talked about that in more detail within the report itself. There were also issues around some sidewalk maintenance, making sure that that's accessible in terms of broken sidewalks or missing sidewalks. You'll notice in this slide, there's a picture of a broken sidewalk that's actually under repair as we speak. So that's really positive. Folks talked about safe crosswalks. So again, that safety in transportation for people who are walking or wheeling and wanting to make sure that the crosswalks are safe. There was talk also about some issues around emergency management. Of course, as the climate changes, people are concerned about things like wildfire, and that came up as part of this dimension. It's something that we look at within outdoor spaces, is safety and emergency management. Next slide, please. Yeah, number 2 in the dimension area is transportation. So that's looking at affordable and accessible transportation. And it was really interesting. Again, snow was an issue around transportation, you know, people concerned about being able to access public transportation safely, and also with their own vehicles in terms of parking lots and exiting their driveways. But public transit was a really big point of conversation. A lot of people really appreciated the public transit in Kimberley, both within the city itself and also the access to Cranbrook. But there was also a group of people who felt like there could be more service in terms of transit in both of those areas. Some of that transit to Cranbrook around healthcare appointments. People felt like it would be wonderful to have more access for, especially for seniors and people with accessibility needs, to get in and get the healthcare that they need, that they have to go out of town for. We also talked to people about active transit or active transportation, and folks were appreciative again of the connectivity in the city, but also would like to see of course, more trails and so forth. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in the big idea piece going forward. And sorry, I should say not, I'm saying trails, but it's actually pathways for connectivity. If we can go to the next slide. Housing, of course, this is an issue right across the province. You know, it's not unique to Kimberley that there are affordability issues. But what did come up, and it came up fairly often in conversation, was this idea of folks who are trying to downsize and maybe not having as many options for that smaller, accessible kind of apartment style living. Maybe on one level. And folks talked about the affordability of that trying to sell a house and then move into a smaller space, sometimes the numbers just didn't add up. So people looking for more accessible housing, and it sounds like there's a lot of data being collected on that currently, and that information will be finished, as I understand it, by the end of 2025. Next slide, please. So the next dimension is around social participation and well-being. And so there was a lot of sense that there was great opportunities for older adults to participate in the community, that there were good programs that were available, strong sense of community overall. People talked a bit about intergenerational programming where younger people came together with older adults, but it seems like this is an area that there's an opportunity to maybe increase some programming around those intergenerational opportunities, or just even providing opportunities to connect folks who are isolated with youth. So maybe with older adults who are more isolated, can't get out in the winter, maybe connecting them with younger people. We also talked a bit about facility upgrades, and again, I'll be talking about that a little bit more in those big ideas, because I think that's an important piece. Some folks didn't feel that some of the public buildings were as accessible as they'd like to see. And I know that there's been that building review. And so those facility issues they've been flagged. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this dimension is interesting because obviously cities are not in the business of healthcare, but I think there's an important piece here around community support and health services being something that cities can be supportive of. So we know that there's a shortage of healthcare professionals in most communities. Most cities and municipalities are struggling to get enough primary care physicians, to get, you know, some of those allied health professionals as well. And so I know that there are some plans in place around that. And of course, cities can support that healthcare piece by both recruitment and retention efforts for healthcare professionals. So not direct support for health services, but maybe that indirect support for folks who work in that system. Mental health supports came up over and over. That was quite a strong theme that we heard from people, that they wish that there were better mental health supports within the community and ways to access that. Home care programs as well. So those are programs to help people stay in their home longer. And there's some great programs in Kimberley, the Better at Home program, for example. But again, I think that's just the need of people who are isolated, particularly in the winter, just making sure that they are being supported. Next slide, please. So respect, social inclusion, and cultural safety is the next dimension. So this is really around how people feel included in their community, how they feel like they are being represented in their community. And overall, this was actually quite positive, that people felt a sense of belonging to the community, that they felt this sense of inclusion. But again, that intergenerational piece came up as a way to maybe connect community members a little bit more in terms of some of the relationship building. Of course, the senior center, I think, is a really important resource that folks are using and are able to connect with one another in that location. And then just talking a bit more about accessibility training for maybe city staff and contractors, just to have people who maybe because of accessibility needs feel a little bit more isolated from their community, that there is some training in place and maybe some consideration around that as well. Next slide, please. Civic engagement and employment opportunities. So this is how folks are engaged with not only things like coming to city council meetings, but also are they able to access information about the city? Are they able to get out and vote? Are they also able to find employment and volunteer opportunities within the city? And so lots of opportunities to volunteer. There is a concern that as volunteers age, that there isn't maybe a steady stream of folks behind them. So that's a consideration just in terms of some succession planning. And also maybe to look at employers hiring youth with exceptionalities. So maybe matching employers with youth who are looking for more work experience, who don't have the access to traditional opportunities. We also noticed that there was a few communication gaps in this area, and that some of that was around public engagement. And again, the city seems to be doing a lot of things around public engagement, but there's something that's a bit lost in communication to residents about what's happening. So some people would say, you know, I didn't know this meeting was happening, or I didn't know this survey was up. Even though it seems like there was a lot of information out there, I think there's just that disconnect that would be worth looking at a little bit more closely. Next slide, please. And that's the last dimension around clear communication and information sharing. So one of the things, and again, we hear this in almost every community, is just having more types of communication with the public that are beyond the things that people identified as real assets in the community, the newsletter, the city website. So thinking about some paper-based strategies, maybe centralizing some of that information so people have a place to go. People talk a lot about having this kind of like one information hub. And again, that I think I have heard that in every community that I've worked in, that folks want to have that one place. So sometimes that might be the library, it might be at City Hall, but a place where they can find information about what they're looking for. Next slide, please. So from those dimension areas, we came up with these sort of 5 big ideas for moving forward. One, of course, is around that winter accessibility, because that came up as a theme in a number of different areas, and I had a lot of conversations about that with folks. Just maybe a little bit more communication and information about how the snow removal is managed, and making that a bit more collaborative with community members. That other piece around emergency preparedness, of course, as I mentioned, people are worrying more and more about some of these emergencies that can happen in the community, particularly related to wildfire. And so maybe developing or bringing together some resources to help people prepare themselves for an emergency. That intergenerational piece, I mentioned it a few times because it came up often in conversation. And so this idea of connecting generations to build community. So just where are there opportunities to have intergenerational programming, bringing together those youth volunteers and more isolated community members especially. And then one of the big pieces that I think Kimberly is really poised for is this idea of developing a para-athletics and adaptive sport tourism focus. That Kimberly has a lot of the infrastructure and the resources in place, and I think would be a natural fit to develop particularly an event-focused para-athletic strategy. So thinking about an event or a number of events. And so we made recommendations around leveraging that accessible tourism piece. And then finally, promoting inclusion around an age-friendly, accessible business program. And this, again, has been a recommendation in many communities because it's very, pardon me, it's very difficult for a lot of particularly small businesses to make whole-scale changes to support accessibility just in terms of cost. But there is the opportunity for the more resource-based type approach with an age-friendly, accessible business program. So what I mean by that is having some sort of standard in place that is designed either by the chamber or with the chamber in the city, or maybe through a committee where there's a set of standards to meet the age-friendly, accessible business program, even acknowledging that businesses are on their way to becoming more accessible. And so that's something that we've outlined in a bit more detail within the plan itself. And last slide, and I'm sorry, I'm just going to have to check there we are. Sorry, I just lost my power to my computer there. So what happens next? Within the report, we have made tables throughout each of these dimension areas. So there's a recommendation, there's actions, there's the city role, and then there's the timeline as well, along with some linkages. So looking at things like grant opportunities or funds that might be available to make these changes. And so the idea is to have a mix of different actions that could happen quite quickly. So some of those short-term actions, so you can get some traction in terms of the plan, and then some medium and long-term recommendations to work towards. And just a point of best practice, excuse me, that the age-friendly accessibility plan should be published. That's a recommendation that we make because that's the best practice standard for age-friendly plans and made available in an accessible format. Excuse me. Sorry. I just got to, excuse me. And then the final piece is just around a basic progress report for the Accessibility Advisory Committee. So just reporting back year to year on some of the key indicators. And I'm going to stop there because I've just lost my voice, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Kate. It's
Sorry about
catchy.
that.
It's catchy. Council, we're going to be dealing with this item a little bit later in the agenda. Do you have any questions for Kate at this point? Go ahead, Councillor Dunneback.
One comment you kept making was, pardon me, age friendly. Is this like specific to an age of person, or is this a broad age from toddler to senior, just to be clear?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the age-friendly initiative started about 20 years ago, and the idea originally was for planning communities specifically for older adults to age actively. And then they realized that this actually wasn't a broad enough sort of approach to keep people in their communities. That was the idea initially, is if you could keep older adults active, you could keep them staying in their communities and aging in place. But the group behind the age-friendly initiative quickly realized that really was not enough. And so this is the reason that they came up with these 8 different dimensions. From those dimensions, the idea is, they call it the 880 rule, that if you design a city that's accessible for someone who's 80, it's also going to be accessible for people who are 8 and people who are 8 months who are in strollers. So yes, age-friendly planning has a component that looks specifically at older adults, so folks 55 plus, 65 plus, but also looks specifically at all ages in accessibility. So the interesting thing in this plan was that in many plans in the province, the report is for just age-friendly planning, which is much more focused on seniors and older adults. But in this plan, we had a parallel focus of accessibility planning and planning for aging in the community. And doing those two things together, I think we're looking at the same goals in many cases in terms of accessibility. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that was perfect. Thank you.
Great.
Further, Council? All right, thanks very much for the presentation, Kate. We'll be dealing with this just a little bit later in the agenda.
Great. Thank you. So I will log off. Or would you like me to stay on?
It's your choice. You can if you wish, but don't feel obliged.
Would you like me to stay on for any questions when you're dealing with it later in the agenda, or?
I think Jasmine should be able to handle that. You've been working closely
Perfect.
with her. Yep.
That sounds great.
All right, cool.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
Okay, take care.
Okay, Council. First up, under bylaws, permits, and policies, we've got a bylaw for adoption. It's the 5-year financial plan bylaw. We've seen this come forward a couple times before for previous readings. It's in for adoption tonight. And the motion on the floor is that Council adopt the 5-year financial plan bylaw as identified in the report. Councillor McBain moves and Councillor McGuire seconds. Any further discussion on this, Krista?
No, I have no further comments. And
All right, awesome. Council, call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Next up, we have development variance permit for 580 308th Street. Motion on the floor is the council direct the corporate officer to issue notice to neighbors of the 580 308th Street intent to vary sections of the bylaw as identified in the report. Could I have a mover, please? Counselor Cairns moves and Counselor McBain seconds. All right, Troy, go ahead.
Yes, thank you.
It's nice to have the pictures, by the way.
Well, when the structure's already there, it's much easier to do that, yeah.
That helps.
Yeah, this is a case where a building permit was issued and the plan that proposed with that permit was, expected to be compliant. And some decisions were made through the installation of the gazebo and ended up being sited closer to the side property line than would otherwise comply with the bylaw. And so when that was identified, the options were presented there that they could either seek variance approval or relocate the structure to make it comply. So the property owner here is asking for variance consideration of the variance, and this recommendation here, of course, would recommend to give notice to make sure there's opportunity for anyone else to give comment on the matter, and then we would likely be back at the next meeting if council supports that at this time.
All right, excellent. Thanks for that, Troy. Counselor McBain.
Yeah, it just seems pretty cut and dry to me. The fact that sticks out is there was no pushback from any of the neighbors. And I'd hate to see somebody go through all the trouble of, even though it should have been probably, easy to figure, to follow those bylaws. What's done is done, and to disassemble or move something to me just seems like overkill. However, if somebody had a problem with it, I think we could go down that road, but to me, this is just straightforward.
Thanks, Counselor Dunneback.
Yeah, just one quick question. Would this not fall under going under the variance board rather than coming to council? I guess I'm a little confused.
Do you want to explain how that works, Troy?
Yeah, in British Columbia, there's two options for considering most variances, and one is through council through a development variance permit, one's through the Board of Variance.
So they
And-
chose council then?
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Troy. Further, Council? Call the question. Go ahead, Counselor McGuire.
Yeah, so there was no concerns around fire or any other hazards that came up.
There's no major staff concerns on this from fire or building. Yep.
Thank you. Okay, call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. All right, next up, we have the Community Grants Policy, FIN 004 revision. Pam has been steadfastly going through revisions of this policy. Obviously, we're on number 4 now. Thanks for all the great work on this, Pam. The motion on the floor is that council approve the revised community grants policy as attached to the report from the Manager of Community Development and Communications. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor McBain, thank you. Councillor Fox seconds. Discussion.
Mr. Mayor, could I speak up?
Absolutely. Go ahead, Councillor Roberts.
I just want to indicate how important this separation is. I have been in conversation with people at the chamber, as you know, and there is a serious concern as to how come some people have this and some people have that, and who gets more and why they get more and which is better and how should we be. And I think the fact that they're separating one kind of grant from the other kind of grant with specific rules and specific accountability is vital. And I'm really glad that we're at the place where this will be clarified. Thanks for doing that.
Thank you for those comments. Councillor McGuire.
Yeah, I appreciate the clarity and some of the wording and clarification. Pulling the two out is great. Separating the two and bringing Ready into this so that there's clarity around process for both grant streams is great. I do, I feel like it would have been nice to have comment from the committee, the grant committee, before bringing it to council, just to bring in some perspective from those on that committee. And one issue that I find with this, the community grants portion, is around the dollar value. So just simply, in reviewing the grants from the last run, and seeing the caliber of the projects that were presented by all the community groups that are doing all of the work for the community, I feel like 30 grand doesn't really cut it. I believe we had 80 grand in the budget for last year. And I could see reducing to $60,000 on the low end and still, you know, honoring the work that's being done in our community and getting a lot of the events off the ground. But a reduction to 30 grand is just a little bit too severe. And for the increase of budget of $30,000, I think we would get huge value based on the proposals that we saw this year. And then the other piece is around the maximum of a $4,000 grant per organization. I think that again, you know, to create value in the reporting for organizations, I think the original $8,000 in the last policy would still be adequate, especially if we were to increase it to 60 grand. So those are my two comments: is, you know, double the funding to this stream from the 30 to the 60, and double the max from 4,000 to 8,000. And if those two amendments were made, I would fully support this motion.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Fox, go ahead.
I would also like to see, I wasn't involved in the preamble discussions of this, that was a little before my time. But I would also like to see the dollar amount that goes to these, to this initiative be increased, because I don't think $30,000 is a lot of money. And I think that $30,000 being reduced from, you know, the nonprofits, even if it works out to say $2,000, because certainly not every group asks for the full amount they can ask for. But there's going to be an impact to that we don't really realize. And I think that that's a real slippery slope to play on that we need to be sort of cautious of. A lot of these events and these things that people are, you know, looking for support with, they're things that make our community really awesome, right? And I don't know, $30,000 isn't a lot of money in the city's budget. It isn't a lot of, you know, nonprofit budgets, but I think we need to make sure that we're sort of thinking about it in the big picture. The other thing that I would like to sort of see is that I think somewhere in here it says that long-term grant recipients can't apply for this one, and I would like to see that pulled out. I think that's at the discretion of the group of that committee if they decide they want to give money. But I should think even if you're receiving a standing grant, it doesn't mean that there's not going to be some event or something else that you wouldn't want a little bit of extra support with. And then sort of pursuant to that, and Jim, I brought this up on the phone earlier today when we were chatting about this, but there's somewhere in there it says that we want to see them demonstrate financial need, and like I kind of get it, but at the same time it's like there ain't a lot of grants out there and everybody needs money. So I feel like that's like maybe a different way of phrasing that a bit, to be a little bit clearer about what that is, because it's like nobody really works for fun, right? It's not like, ooh, I wish I could sit in the cube all day. Like that's not the reality of it. So I think we know why people like they need the money to keep the lights on, but it's what are they, you know, how are they using that in the grand scheme of their, you know, operation? So those are changes I would like to see.
Thank you. Thank you for those comments. Further? Councillor Cairns, go ahead.
Great. Thanks, Pam, for all of your work on this, and really appreciate all that's underway to bring a clearer, more principled approach to how the dollars are distributed to nonprofits. And we know that nonprofits are a key driver of our well-being and our economy. And we definitely needed that rigor and to ensure alignment with our OCP and long-term strategy. And I think that the recommendations here do address that piece around the clear, explicit criteria for eligibility, evaluation, reporting. And I'd like to see it strengthened by, well, I'd love to see a connection to organizations' plans so that we have a better idea of how organizations are aligning with our OCPs. And for communication both between organizations and the city to understand better what organizations are doing, and in turn, increasing the amount for 2026 to 60,000 rather than the 30. So I think that would help to understand how the organizations actually fit together and encourage partnership and coordination. I'd also support that increase from the 4,000 max to the 8,000 max. Those are my comments.
Thank you for that, Councillor Cairns. Go ahead, Councillor McBain.
I'm just curious how everybody came up with those values, because we sat through a presentation before and Jim gave us some analysis. It seems weird that all of you guys have the exact same amount. So I'll just be curious, that's all.
Yeah, so again, when I was reviewing the grant applications this year, I was using a lens of, based on the caliber of the reports, if we really had to reduce the amount from $80,000 down and still be able to support the projects that really deserved the money, where would we land? And my opinion was that it was somewhere in the $65,000 to $70,000 range. And this brings us well below that. 30 grand, if I was looking at those reports, there would be a lot being cut off that were good programs. So the original reduction from $130,000 down to $80,000, I can see where that came from, and understand that. But we're going from $130,000 to $30,000, so that's a $100,000 cut in community grants in our community. And to me, that's not really acceptable. Why we all came up with the same one? It could have been that I just framed it as 60 grand and everybody just jumped on the bandwagon. I'm not sure.
I think in fact, you did, when we had this conversation last time, had talked to that, if I remember correctly. Go ahead, Councillor Dunneback.
Thanks for the report here. I appreciate it. I understand the meaning of what it takes to volunteer and to get people together. And I think what I'd like to see is all of these groups maybe linking together and reaching out to bigger places rather than the city, but to Columbia Basin Trust. And basically, they're all a piece of a pie, and shoot for the stars and ask for lots, and maybe have some training involved for them for ways to teach them ways to create money themselves, whether it's silent auctions, bake sales, whatever. But I think this day and age, strength in numbers, I'm gonna lost words here. Different societies linking together for a moment as a whole gives you a better opportunity. And then essentially, if you get that and everybody doesn't need it, then there's a kitty there that if somebody needs it, they can link together and then divvy it out and build a kitty that they can then sort of pick and choose from as is needed with a committee of some sort. That's what I'd like to see anyways.
Thank you, Councillor Dunneback. Councillor Fox, go ahead.
I agree that it would be good to see collaborative approaches between the nonprofits. I don't think we can necessarily force people to play nice or like work together. But I do think that, there's ways we could look at prioritizing or, encouraging those sorts of applications coming forward. But one thing I want us to be really, really cautious of is that a nonprofit fundamentally is not intended to make money. It's intended to provide a service to its members. And a corporation is intended to make money. That's its sole purpose, but a nonprofit isn't. And when we're in the position of trying to make an organization that is structurally not designed to do that, we are going to enter into a myriad of problems that I think we're already seeing in lots of capacities. And I think it's something we want to be really, really cognizant of and cautious of.
Thank you. Pam, did you want to comment?
Just a couple of comments in relation to, a lot of the things that you're saying. I feel like I was remiss to not attach application forms. with the required attachments that we will be asking applicants for, including audited financial statements. It'll show what's in reserves, and it'll kind of make a little bit more sense about what is going to determine financial need based on, you know, what we're getting from all the applicants. I think we're going to get inundated by applications. I'm happy that the new policy will make it very clear about when the application process is. It certainly defines that. I think we'll get a lot of applications, and we need to have a weighted, which we do have, and I should have attached it, a weighted way for council to evaluate those applicants. So that's in terms of the long-term grants, but in terms of the community grants as well, it will be a weighted application form and evaluation form. And there is one question on the application that suggests that partnerships or alliances with other organizations would be seen favorably, though not required. We do like to see, you know, linkages between multiple organizations.
Thanks for that, Pam. Further, council? A couple of things for me, I guess. This policy, or these policies, the two policies are absolutely critical in our governance role in taking the money that we do provide, not just to not-for-profits, but all organizations that are outside internal city spending, and making sure that that taxpayer money is getting the best value for the dollar. Right now, notwithstanding, and I'll come back to the 60K versus the 30K thing in a second, but we are allocating a little over 8% of our collected tax money to not-for-profits in the form of just the community grants, as we've talked about, free facility usage, permissive property tax exemptions, and a third of Pam's time to help the not-for-profits with not only their applications, but finding other sources of, funding should they be available. So this community grant program and the long-term grant program are one actually small piece of the plethora of things that we do provide for the not-for-profits. The other comment I'd like to make is that it's not the city's sole responsibility to ensure that the not-for-profits are staying in business. Councillor Dunneback indicated other granting organizations like Columbia Basin Trust, and the CBT money goes beyond just the ready grants that we have. They're available to talk to any organization anytime about further financial requirements. And of course, there's also fundraising on the part of the organizations as well. So there are multiple avenues that the not-for-profits have, of which we are one piece of that. But I think it's a slippery slope to get into the situation where the not-for-profits, the 40 or 45 or 50 or so that we have, are relying on the city, you know, for their livelihood. We are a piece of that, and that's awesome. And we've been doing that for a while. We will continue to do that. But there are other, other options. With respect to the 30 versus the 60K, I would also support the move to $60,000 this year, but not to the 8K. I mean, if you do the quick math on that, $60,000 at 4K will provide money for 15 organizations, and at 8K it represents at the max 8 or 9. Now, I appreciate not everybody's going to be, going for the max, but I think as we've seen in recent grant applications, more and more of the organizations have gone way beyond kind of what has traditionally been put in there. And we've seen applications come in for $10,000 and $15,000 and $20,000. So there does need to be some rational view for how do we maximize the number of organizations that can benefit with a decent amount of money to help meet the need, not necessarily the full need, but certainly meet the need in conjunction with some other funding. Go ahead, Councillor McGuire.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And there's no obligation for us to fund projects fully. So if somebody comes in with an $8,000 project and it doesn't really feel like it has massive benefit to the community, then that's, our prerogative to say, actually, we can support this at a percentage, but there's no way you're getting $8,000. And yeah, like you said previously, we've not capped it. So the fact that we moved to a cap last year was helpful to set expectations. But I mean, there's still flexibility to do partial funding.
Fair comment. Councillor Fox, and then we'll
Yeah, I just,
move to call the question.
I to agree with Councillor McGuire, one, not everyone is going to ask for the full amount because they're just not. They don't, not everyone needs $8,000 for whatever their project is. And again, that committee does not have to dole out that full amount for anything, right? Should they deem whatever reasoning behind that. It's also just this thing, and I bring this up a lot, but it's the way we equate how much tax something costs. And it's as much as I say we can't expect nonprofits to be profitable. And no, I don't think we're, necessarily in the job of keeping them functioning, but I do think it's worth it for us to take some time to reflect upon what we lose if these organizations start closing doors because they just can't keep the lights on because we're asking them to exist in a way they're fundamentally not designed for. And pursuant to that, we as a city are not intended to be profitable. We're meant to provide services. And certainly we don't want to rack up enormous amounts of debt on our taxpayers doing that. But I think we need to think sort of larger picture about what we lose, not in terms of in a budget line, but in terms of our community as we chip away at this funding.
Thank you, Councillor Fox. So we have a motion on the floor. As part of that, it includes the 30,000. We'll need a separate motion to move that to 60. Is that, will that work?
Yeah, I think we vote on the motion that's on the floor if it gets defeated. There's a few different things we're talking about here. So one of them is increasing from $30,000 to $60,000. We have the 30 in the current 5-year financial plan bylaw. So we would have to refer that to budget deliberations for the upcoming financial plan in order to adjust that amount. So that would essentially be the resolution if council wanted to do that. It'd be increased to from 30 to 60, and that the funding of the $30,000 be referred to budget deliberations. Probably best to do, if council wants to move forward with increasing from 4 to 8, a separate resolution for that, just so we're clear on that. That can be just a change to the policy.
So so I think, so how do we move forward with a motion on the policy itself, exclusive of that 30K, which is included in there, or and also the 4K?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, yeah, go ahead.
I think we can approve as is and then add additional motions.
And then modify.
Yeah, modify. How does that work for everybody? Like, I think the intent of what's going on here is good. It's just the budgetary pieces that we can add extra motions for.
Yeah, I think procedurally that makes sense because now we just got a defeated motion and then you kind of have to start the wheel again.
So let's ask the experts on this. Is that going to work? We're not going to break any procedural.
I
points
think
here?
it's gonna work. It would, however, once you get to after budget deliberation, it would require an amendment to the policy. I don't know though, from the perspective of receiving the applications, what the timing is gonna be.
What do you mean?
We will put a call for applications. I was hoping in late September, October, it could be pushed.
So can't we just do the amended motions tonight?
Yeah,
I mean, we're
I
talking
think so.
about two specific things. I don't think we need a staff report for that.
Yeah, so I think if we go ahead, ask the question, council approves the policy, the next resolution would be that the funding under the new policy be amended from $30,000 to $60,000, with the $30,000 funding be referred to budget deliberations. And then if there's a subsequent change from the 4 to the 8, that would be another amendment to the recently approved policy.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to call the question on the motion on the floor, and that is on the adoption of the policy. All those in favor? Any
As amended?
No, we haven't amended anything yet. Yeah. Any opposed? That motion is carried. Okay, thanks for the great work on this, Pam. This has been grinding, no question. The more things are refined, the more the minutia comes into play. And I think council really appreciates the work that you've done on this. Okay, the amending motion. Could you articulate that one more time?
Yeah, so something to the effect that council moved that the maximum funding under the current policy, recently approved policy, be adjusted from $30,000 to $60,000, and that the funding of the $30,000 be referred to deliberation of the 2026 to 2030 5-year financial plan bylaw.
Okay, as he said, could I have a mover, please? Councillor McBain, thank you. Councillor McGuire seconds. Further discussion. Go ahead.
I'm just curious about inflationary increases. I'm just thinking 20 years down the road. I don't know. Does this become nothing? It's just a question.
Yeah, I think that can be revisited as well through financial plan deliberations. That Pam and I were talking this morning, and some other communities, they've got a static amount, and it's, I think the committee would be a good conduit for that. Take the intake any applications. If they're seeing that there's a stronger need in the community, that could certainly be brought forward as a budget.
Thanks for that input, Jim. Okay, further discussion on the motion on the floor, and that is to move from the 30 back to the 60K. Call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, that motion is carried. Do we want a motion on the 4 versus the 8?
Or an alternative.
I'm good with the 4. So could you be kind enough to articulate the?
Yeah. So similarly, that the policy be amended to increase the maximum amount that can be applied for from $4,000 to $8,000, and that wouldn't require a budget amendment. It's the same amount of money, just different split.
Okay, you got that, Maurice?
Yeah.
Mostly. So it's bad form for council to do resolutions on the fly, but not the CAO.
That's debatable.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Jim. Okay, can I have a mover, please? Councillor McGuire moves and Councillor Cairns seconds. Discussion?
Can we
Go
say
ahead,
it? Can we say it one more time, just so I have it clear in my head? Sorry.
Yeah. So basically, we're asking that the maximum amount that can be applied for under the policy be increased from $4,000 to $8,000.
Discussion? So I'm not going to support this. I appreciate Councillor Fox's comments on this, but I think our experience has been something different with the grant apps that we've gotten over the last number of years. And I really feel like positioning ourselves to provide grants to more organizations is important as we are watching the amount of money that we're spending. So for those reasons, I'm not going to support it, but yeah. Go ahead, Councillor Dunneback.
Kind of opposite of what you said there, Don, or Mr. Mayor, was in the beginning when I started watching council, I seen lots of nonprofits ask for multiples in the granting process. And I've seen over time how it's been adjusted to one nonprofit, one ask. That's your piece of the pie. This is what you're going to get. If you're asking for a lot, it comes to us. We talk about it and decipher whether their financials advocate for this. So that's why I'm in favor of it, because it has changed over time, and we have I feel like it's gotten better and there's more communication, so.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor McBain.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the fact that, everybody's, wants to have a little bit more, I guess it's like flexibility, but I agree. I would rather spread things out than try to, have larger amounts. I look at how we get funded through, the province and things like that. A lot of times the granting that we're looking for is based on regulated items that we have to do. We have no other choice and we have to do that. So we have to go and ask for money. Not taking anything away from nonprofits. A lot of this stuff is non-essential. So I would rather spread things out and have more groups participate rather than, potentially making the pool smaller by some large asks. So I won't be supporting the increase either.
Thank you, Counselor.
I'm gonna-
Counselor Roberts,
Can
go
I
ahead.
speak in? Yeah, I'm going to speak against it too. I think if we're reducing the amount, we should reducing the amount that an absolutely request for, the amount that you can request money for. I think it's the whole thing is about the expectation. When we put it out, what we're willing to do and what we're able to do, then that's the expectation and that's what you apply for. I've been writing grants for a year now, and you look at it and say, okay, well, what can I get from this place? And what can I get from that place? And you just go accordingly. Nobody's nose is going to be bent out of joint because we changed the limit. It is what it is.
Thank you,
So
Counselor.
I'll be voting against the change.
Last comment to Counselor Cairns, and then I'll call the question.
Thanks. I think reducing the amount an organization can apply for without having any information about the value that that project is bringing to the community is entirely arbitrary. It's making a decision before even going through the evaluation criteria, which is kind of that principled approach. So I definitely support increasing the amount, and I think that's the job of the committee to actually go through and determine how is it aligned with our OCP, our long-term strategy, and the value that it brings to our community. So there can be some higher cost items that bring a whole lot more benefit to the community rather than just kind of deciding ahead in a very prescriptive approach that, everyone's going to get just a little bit. So I support the increased amount.
Okay, thank you. With that said, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? Counselor Roberts, Counselor McBain, and myself are opposed. The motion is carried. All right, next up, we have the long-term grants policy. We have had some discussion on this as we've gone, so hopefully this will go a little bit quicker. The motion on the floor is the council approve the long-term grants policy as attached to the staff report from the Manager of Community Development and Comms. Mover, please. Councillor McGuire moves and Councillor McBain seconds. Discussion. Pam, did you want to make any comments on this? This is really the big change in what we've done is creating a second policy.
Yeah, exactly. Just in going through the community grants policy, looking at revisions and making revisions to the long-term grant section, it just made no sense to keep that in there. So it was pulled out into its own policy. Because with the last round, when Kimberley Helping Hands Food Bank and the Kimberley Nature Park came and asked for money, there was a lot of questions that, those guys were asking me that I didn't have the answers to. What's the application? But the 5 Ws, essentially. So I think the policy answers those 5 Ws. It does define a term, which we did do with the last round of community grants changes, was to define the term of the 4 years and link it to council's corporate strategic plan. Other changes are just to make sure that the applications, the process is defined, what the application process is, applicants need to come in and present. Define again, the term, the amount of funding that's available. The 1.5% is taken away from this long-term grants, but it is actually defined in the community grants policy. So we won't need to change that in the future, but if you want to change it in here, there is no 1.5% increase for long-term grant holders. Other than that, the changes are listed within the policy. I'm certainly happy to answer questions or listen to your discussion.
Yeah, thanks, Pam. Councillor McGuire.
Yeah, I don't have an issue with the increases on this one because again, we're going to be reviewing every 4 years anyways. And, you know, inflation is not going to get carried away in 4 years, in my opinion. It's just, yeah. Maybe it will, but hopefully not.
It depends on which definition of inflation we're talking about, I guess.
So yeah, I'm fine without the 1.5%. But one issue I do have with this is just around the reporting. We went from 0 reporting for long-term grants, as in like the organizations never really had to come to report at all, to once a year. And personally, I think that's excessive. I don't think we need every single organization that we're getting a standing grant from to come into the council chambers once a year and do a presentation, especially if there's, I don't know how many there's going to be come this next round. I don't know if there's a limit to that. So my preference would be to see reporting requirements that are presented to council so that we can review and keep a track of what's going on, but not necessarily have council chambers filled with every organization that's getting funding every year. Obviously, at least once per funding cycle, or maybe even twice, maybe a midterm report and a final report. I don't know. I'm open to suggestions, but I do feel that 4 times for a single grant, 4 presentations to council, 5 if you include the initial ask, is excessive.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McBain.
I wholeheartedly agree with Councillor McGuire. I think a lot of times it's a waste of time for groups to come in, and we can read. So I don't see any problem with just getting reports. And if we have questions, we can call them in and ask them questions.
So just for clarification then, because I think you were talking about 2 different things. You were talking about not requiring reporting, but maybe midterm and final. And
I think annual reporting is required anyways, and I think it always has been. It's just we've never seen those reports. So I'd like to see those reports at the council table.
Annually. Okay, cool. Just wanted to clarify that.
But I don't necessarily need a delegation from the organization once a year. And in fact, I feel like that's just increasing the time at the council table as well, and not really required. It's also a huge burden for the organizations. Not all organizations have the capacity to be able to prepare those.
Well, I think the annual report, upon review, if it looks like something is going sideways, we have the option to call them in. So we can deal with that on an exception basis. Councillor Fox.
I agree. I don't necessarily think they need to come in every year. But I would like to see the reports every year. I also think it would be super helpful if we could, when we are asking a group to come in and present to council, be really clear about what we're asking them to bring and what we sort of want to see in that presentation and what makes that presentation valuable to us. Because I think a lot of groups just don't know what to do. So they kind of just do whatever. And I don't think it's too much for us to just sort of define what we want to see there.
Can you comment on that, Pam, please?
I feel again remiss to not have put that annual report as an attachment within this report so that you could see essentially what we're asking them to provide to us every year. Do they need to come in every year? Probably not, but we absolutely require that annual reporting so we're able to report back financially, to taxpayers essentially. But yeah, I'm happy if they don't have to come in. It is an administrative burden. But I also agree with you, Diana. If we do require them to come in, we have to be very clear about what we want them to say in that presentation, which is what we will do through the application process as well.
Yeah, so if you could, both for the the previous community grants and for this, just copy council in on those applications. That'd be awesome. Just so we get to have a look at kind of what's built in today.
Absolutely, yeah. And then as we go forward, all of the reports will be compiled and put probably with an accompanying staff report and put on a council agenda without the need for the organizations to come forward if that's what you.
Thanks, ma'am. Councilor McBain. Go ahead.
You did mention audit in your previous statement on the, I'm just making sure that it's not an actual audit because that's not very many nonprofits in our community get audits.
I think in terms of long-term grants, they have to be registered society holders or, you know, Canada Revenue Agency, which requires audited financial statements in order for them to. Charities do, so the CRA will require an audited.
That's not accurate. So audited financials are required for some of the big funders out there, some of the foundation money, but there are charitable organizations within our community that cannot afford an audit.
So there's 3 levels though, right? The full audit, which
Yeah,
is
that's what I mean.
very
I'm
expensive.
talking about the full audit. Yeah.
But the letter, just a simple letter coming from the accountants. I think that's, go ahead, Pam.
That's exactly what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Councilor McGuire. Councilor Fox, go ahead. Last word to you, and then we'll call the question.
Just 2 things. I actually don't think it's a problem. I know it costs a lot more to get an audited statement done, but I think also if someone knows that that's part of the 4-year plan, they don't necessarily have to present it up front, but somewhere within that 4-year cycle, we do want to see that. I don't think that's problematic. They can budget it for it. They can figure out how to make that work. And then the only other thing, and Jim and I spoke about this earlier, I don't love that it's tethered to the council cycle. I understand that it needs to be tethered to something and you need to have sort of a definitive start and end, but there's just a potential for a lot of things to get very political that makes me really uncomfortable.
So I think it was mentioned earlier, Councilor Fox, that it was tied to the strategic priorities cycle, and which is tied to the council cycle because the council gets to set the strategic priorities for the next term. So, okay, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any?
I don't know what we're voting on.
Okay. The long-term grants policy. It's the approval of long-term grants policy as identified in the staff report.
But not requiring. The end of the report.
Yeah, that's a process thing, not a policy thing inside. So we can deal with that later. Yeah. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried.
So Don,
All right.
Don, could we amend that now so that it's clear?
I thought you might ask that. So I'm not sure if I captured it correctly. Please chime in if I didn't. So a motion that the reporting requirements in the policy be amended to require the grant recipients to submit an annual report and that the reports be provided to council, and further that the recipients only be required to present to council at the end of the funding term as opposed to annually
Or as requested.
or as requested.
Yeah. Okay. All those in favor? Any opposed? Oh, sorry. Councilor McGuire moves and Councilor Dunneback seconds. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Next up, we have notice on title for 275 Cranbrook Street. Motion on the floor is the council direct corporate officer to file the notice on title for the contraventions as identified in the staff report. Councilor McBain moves and Councilor Karen seconds. Any discussion on this? I think it's fairly straightforward in the report.
As presented, staff recommends we proceed with this.
And the kind of the homeowner hasn't bothered to respond.
They did respond for clarification from the building inspector, and there's been no submission or anything to request delay or referral.
Okay, awesome. Call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. And secondary motion there is that further information in respect of this matter may be inspected at Kimberley City Hall during regular business hours. I know I didn't put it together.
It goes together. It's just stating.
A and B? Okay, good enough. Scratch that. Next up, we have the age-friendly accessibility plan. And the motion on the floor is the council approve the City of Kimberley age-friendly accessibility plan is attached in the report. Councillor McBain moves and Councillor Karen seconds. Go ahead, Jasmine.
Kate already presented most of it, but thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right.
So as Kate presented, the age-friendly accessibility plan that is attached to this staff report is informed by significant public consultation, including feedback from the Accessibility Advisory Committee, many of whom are watching online right now, and Mr. Irons has joined us in council chambers today. We've been working on this project for a number of months, and this represents the final deliverable in the requirements of the city according to the Accessible BC Act. So we were asked to establish an accessibility advisory committee that would then inform an accessibility plan to address barriers to accessing city services, and then that would include a mechanism for public feedback on accessibility issues and on the plan itself. And so those deliverables are captured within the plan, and therefore the plan sort of closes the loop on that obligation. The Accessibility Advisory Committee, of course, going forward, will continue to be a part of that evaluation and accountability piece, but that's it.
Hey, that was a lightning fast summary. Thank you for that. All right, council, comments or questions? Go ahead, Councillor Cairns.
Thanks for the great work. Yeah, and yeah, thanks to the Accessibility Committee as well. It's really nice to see this plan.
Further, council? Call a question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried.
Thank you.
Very thorough job on this, Jasmine. There are a lot of elements. And of course, there are a fair number of impacts on project budgets and things like that. So this will be kind of an ongoing implementation over a long period of time, but long overdue. City buildings in particular, they're all old. Accessibility was never a consideration back in the day. And I think everybody understands we can't just wave a magic wand and make those change, like council chambers here, for example. But having this plan in place is going to enable us to move forward in a planned fashion and actually move forward, which I think is the goal. Jeremy, did you want to make a comment on behalf of the committee? Don't feel like you have to, but if you would like to.
Well, one thing that did strike me interesting, one of the councillors that
Jay,
Ashland's there.
excuse me, maybe I'll just grab you a mic here so
Sure.
folks can hear you and we'll do you too.
Thank you. Yeah, what a comment about it being titled age-friendly accessibility plan. And really what struck me was whatever age you are, you have accessibility issues, whether you're a young child or whether you're a senior. And with the aging comes health issues and so on. And so I think when it said age-friendly, it was encompassing literally everybody. That was my only thought.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for those comments. And thanks for the work you're doing on the committee. Okay, we voted on that, right? Next up, we have the proposed Highway 95A 309th Avenue, pedestrian crossing. And the motion on the floor is that council provide a letter to the Ministry of Transportation and Transit expressing council's support for the installation of a pedestrian activated crossing at 309th and Highway 95A. That's at the Marysville School crossing. Councillor McBain moves and Councillor McGuire seconds. All right. Comments? Go ahead, Councillor Dunneback, and then Councillor McBain.
I remember us talking about this when the whole restructuring was going on there. Did we put any manifolds in there? Or are we gonna now be ripping that up to put all the stuff in there for the wiring of a intersection there? Just a comment, I guess.
Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, I can address that. Thanks for your comment there, Councillor Dunnebeck. So we haven't installed any conduit with the projects that kind of happened on either side there. That being said, there's new technologies available that don't require underground wiring and stuff available. So there's solutions that can happen that won't require a total rip up of what has been put in place. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor McBain, then Councillor Fox.
Yeah, no, I'll make it short. I think this is a great idea. One thing that I really enjoy seeing at this spot is people using the crosswalk. It's nothing more frustrating to me than when I'm driving around in town. Marysville Falls is the perfect example. When you can walk 40 feet one way to a safe crosswalk and people decide that they're just going to walk right onto the highway, a lot of times without even looking. It's encouraging though at this area, and I know a lot of it is kids and their parents and grandparents and stuff, but people use this crosswalk and they use it regularly. So I think, and I think just given the importance that it's near a school on a highway, I think it's a great idea. I think it's long overdue. I wish the ministry would look at more options like roundabouts with beaconed crosswalks and things like that for Kimberley to keep traffic flowing. I mean, we talked about reducing speeds, but we also want to be able to keep traffic flowing. So anyways, I think this is a great idea.
Councillor Fox.
Yeah, I want to see these all over town. I wholeheartedly support this. I'm on board. Let's do more of them. Like, it can be scary to try and cross the street.
Councillor McGuire.
Yeah, I support this too, and I do have a couple of questions though, just around, is there signage for this type of installation, especially on the highway, to warn pedestrians that, you know, to allow traffic to stop before they cross? I'm just curious because I would hate to see somebody press this and then just walk into traffic. And the other comment was just around whether we'll still have a crossing guard there during the morning and evening school crossing times.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor McGuire. Great questions. So your first question was around whether advanced warning systems would be required. So that is something we would need to work with the ministry on to determine if indeed it is required. It's going to be based on kind of visibility and speed limits and stuff like that. Initially, I don't think it will be because it is a 50K zone throughout there and decent sight lines, but that is something we'll need to confirm with the ministry if advanced warning is required. And secondly, we are in talks with Marysville School and SD6, and as of right now, they are committed to maintaining that crossing guard during the school hours. And your concern of somebody kind of pushing the button and not looking and going straight across the highway is echoed from the ministry, and that's something that they're looking for confirmation on as well. So yeah, great questions on those, and we'll consider those as we work forward.
Jim.
Yeah, just for clarification, we're a ways away from this happening yet. The ministry hasn't been supportive of this in the past, but we're hoping with council's request and support through ICBC that they'll see the changing their previous stance on this.
Yeah, interestingly, the conversations about crosswalks in general from the ministry are that data shows in certain cases and in more than a few, the addition of crosswalks has actually increased the incidents that have happened. It's an empowering of pedestrians, that there is a higher likelihood when there's a crosswalk there that they're just going to step into it. They have all kinds of data to back that up. We have been advocating for this particular intersection and a couple of others for the better part of, well, it's measured in years now. And if I remember correctly, the last meeting that we had with MOTT, Nick or Jim, they were softening on this particular intersection, if I remember correctly. Their comments were, well, softening to the extent it wasn't, no, we'll never do that. there was a door that was left open a little bit. So as Jim said, hopefully with the advent of a letter of support and ICBC support, we'll see some changes there. MOTT they are a data-driven organization, not an emotional-driven one. And it makes it difficult for things like this. Okay, go ahead.
Just a quick comment about the down the road, you know, if this looks like it's going to go ahead, then it might be worth just taking a look at that interior health Vision Zero road safety funding fund. Because the projects in both Fernie and Golden are school crossing related. Might be a possibility.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. Okay, call the question. Did I call the question on that? Sorry, we're rambling forward a couple of times. All those in favor? Any opposed? The motion is carried. Next up, we have the Transit Improvement Program, the expansion plan. We passed a motion on this a while back, and the costs have changed slightly, which is why it's back in front of us, I believe, right, Troy? And on the floor, the resolution is that council approve the proposed expansion of Route 22 KC commuter, the Kimberley Cranbrook commuter service, to include 850 hours of service and 2 additional fleet vehicles, resulting in a net annual municipal cost share of $63,163. This is if I remember correctly from the report, about $4,000 or so higher than what the previous approval was. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor McBain, thank you. And Councillor Roberts seconds. Troy, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mayor McCormick. Yeah, as you mentioned last fall about this time, council had previously approved this expansion of the Route 22 commuter service, which was, of course, as is this time around, subject to the provincial funding from the annual budget process. And last time around, unfortunately, the expansion wasn't approved at the provincial level. So yeah, the purpose here is to kind of reconfirm council's desire to pursue this expansion. Again, that will, if council supports that, it'll be subject to provincial funding approval that we will find out probably in around May somewhere. And yeah, there's been a minor cost increase there of about $4,500 from the estimate from last year. And of course, that costing is further refined and confirmed if the provincial funding is approved and prior to the final implementation there.
Thank you, Troy. Councillor Fox, then Councillor Dunnebeck.
I just want to make sure that I'm understanding it right. So it would be an increase to just the Kimberley Cranbrook commuter? And like how many more trips a day?
I could have clarified that earlier, sorry. So similar to what was considered and approved last year, it is expansion of the commuter service only. So presently that is 2 morning trips, 2 evening trips back and forth. And this would add 1 more morning trip and 1 more afternoon trip to that service. That's
and then the additional further.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and then the additional fleet vehicles are just to support that, not necessarily to support other stuff.
Primarily the expanded service, but there's a little bit of part of why they ask for or their push for those extra vehicles is there is to kind of provide wider support to our 4 different services overall.
Okay.
So backup vehicle. So.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
Councillor Dunnebeck.
Most of my questions were answered there. The one thing that I'm curious about is because if this gets approved, can we collaborate with the city of Cranbrook and ask them to share this cost because we're reducing impact to their city by putting people on buses?
Go ahead, Troy.
We can continue those talks. We are working with Cranbrook Regional District and ACOM around some regional transit expansion opportunities. And those other partners do recognize the value of that service as one aspect of that. Cranbrook, I think, is struggling with their own transit service questions and costs and everything, but we can, there's nothing we can do to force them to help pay for that. But certainly we can continue to collaborate with them and.
Yeah, worst case scenario, they say no, and then we know we asked and tried, I guess.
Thanks, Councillor Dunnebeck. Further? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. The second half of that is the council authorized the manager of planning and sustainability to sign the MOU for submission to BC Transit. Councillor McBain moves and Councillor McGuire seconds. All those in favor? That motion is carried. Okay, we have one item of correspondence tonight. Move receipt. Councillor McBain, thank you. And Councillor McGuire seconds. Any comments? Call the question on receipt. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Okay, thanks, council. 2 hours for the regular. We do have it in camera. We're going to take a short break before we start that, just so everybody can freshen up a little bit. We'll need everybody's attention as we roll through the in camera tonight. Okay, need a motion to go in camera. Thank you, Councillor Cairns, and Councillor McBain seconds. All those in favor? Motion is carried. Thanks, staff, for being here. Thanks, Jeremy, for sticking around.
Thanks, Jake.
Hey, Maurice.